Hello and welcome to Transcend the Diet Dogma, finding your client's unique protocol. My name is Adair Anderson. I am the product marketing educator here at Vibrant and want to go over some housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please submit them as a comment. There will be time at the end for Q&A, and we will go through all of the comments at that time to make sure we address all of your questions. And now I am pleased to introduce you to our speaker, Carly Pollack. Carly Pollack is far from your typical nutritionist. With a master's degree in holistic nutrition and certified as a holistic practitioner, she beautifully marries the science of the body to the spiritual wisdom of our intuition. Carly has been consulting for over 15 years and is the owner of Nutritional Wisdom, an award-winning private practice based in Austin, Texas. Additionally, she's been a featured speaker at Facebook, Atlassian, and South by Southwest, just to name a few. She is also the published author of the Amazon best-selling book, Feed Your Soul. Known as a permanent change expert, Carly's helped thousands of people heal their bodies and find that ever-elusive balance we call optimal mind-body health. Take it away, Carly.
Thank you. I am so excited to share this message with you today on how we transcend the diet dogma that is constantly being thrown at us so that we can not only feel confident in what we need to eat to heal ourselves, nourish our friends and family, and also truly help our patients and clients heal in a deep, profound, and permanent way. When I first got into this field, it was probably like most of you did. I was selfishly searching how to heal myself. And when I finally found the diet that was working for me to heal all of my autoimmune symptoms, help me lose weight, feel better, heal my skin, I started the paleo diet. And like all of us, we have this confirmation bias, which is that we will subconsciously seek out information that proves what we believe to be true. So I start eating the paleo diet, which is an amazing diet, and we're going to talk about it and break it down today as one of the 3 most popular diets out there today. And I started reading all the books written by paleo experts. I started following all the doctors that were pushing a paleo protocol and looking for all the studies that were proving the benefits of the Paleolithic diet. So naturally, I thought that every client who came to see me would also benefit. And I remember it was 15 years ago, my first year in practice, as the universe would have it, because we're always here to learn lessons. I had this client who was from India, and she had a long family lineage going generations back of vegetarians. And she came to me as a vegetarian, although an irresponsible one, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and mac and fake cheese and that sort of thing. And she felt horrible. She had all these symptoms. So naturally, what I did was put her on the paleo diet. And initially, she started to feel really good. So here I am patting myself on the back that I've gotten yet another one right. And soon after that, she came back with all of these other sets of symptoms. And the most important one was her telling me that ethically, she didn't feel right about eating animal protein. And we know how strong the mind can be, the biology of belief, and that what we believe affects every cell of our body. So at that point, I realized that there has to be different approach for different people. So we sat down again, and I actually put her back on a vegetarian. In fact, it was a vegan protocol. I took her off dairy because I knew she was having symptoms from that. And I taught her how to be a responsible, thriving vegan. And her health just soared. All of her symptoms went away. She went down to her ideal weight. She felt so in alignment with how she was eating. And she was so thankful to me that I was open-minded enough not to think that there was a one-size-fits-all approach to nutrition and nourishment. So before we jump in, I have a little joke for you. Two vegans, a carnivore MD, and a paleo eater all walk into a gym, apparently with their shirts off. Can you tell which one is which? Who is the vegan? Who is the meat eater? Let's add something even more to the mix. Let's add Dr. Gundry, who is famous for his work with the book, The Plant Paradox. And it's based on a lot of research and studies that claim that lectins, one of the proteins that are found in a lot of foods, are the anti-nutrients behind many long-term chronic health conditions like obesity, chronic inflammation, autoimmune disease. And so his diet plan cuts out foods that contain lectins like wheat, beans, potatoes, nuts, dairy, and actually quite a few green vegetables. Well, I can promise you that this beefy hunk, third one down, Simon Hill, or Rich Roll, the second one to the right, who are two thriving plant-based vegans, they're eating lectins breakfast, lunch, and dinner and having no issue whatsoever. The other two, and a medical doctor, Dr. Paul Saladino to the left, carnivore MD, Mark Sisson, one of the original people who were spreading the message about primal blueprint and paleo eating, they're eating the opposite way. And here you have four thriving, very attractive individuals, and you really couldn't tell which one is which. So I ask you, who's right? And that's what I'm here to help you answer today. And we're going to get deep into it, but I'll give you my initial answer right now, which is all four of these experts are right. And all four of them are wrong at different times when it applies to different people. And I know that's really hard for everybody to hear because we're so busy with our clients, our patients, and our lives. And health is so complicated, and there's so many things that we need to look at this point. Hormones, heavy metals, gut microbiome, day-to-day stress, food, movement, that I know we would all really love, myself included, to have an expert say, this is the diet that is for you forever, for the rest of your life. And we could just check that off a very long list of unknowns and go, okay, I'm just going to eat like this. But it's not that simple. And we really have to dive into finding your unique medicine so that you can be at the peak of health and vitality. I really want to, before we move forward, erase your bias of what you already believe about what is a healthy diet. So I'm going to, Men in Black everybody right now with a little memory erasing gun. And I'm actually going to poke some holes in nutrition as a science, although this is my field and I am in deep respect to it. I want you to remember that macronutrients weren't even discovered until the mid 1800s. We didn't even know what a protein, carb, or fat was. Vitamins weren't discovered until the 1900s. It's only been in the last 20 years that we've begun studying newer problems like overconsumption, lack of movement, all of the chemicals that are in our food. So when you compare nutrition to chemistry, nutrition is in its alchemy days. I mean, think about the advice you were giving 10 years ago about what to eat. And I hope, I don't have any embarrassment about telling people to put agave nectar in everything and then coming back 10 years later and going, whoops, just kidding. We have better information now. I hope that we are growing as we continue to learn. And I have to say something about studies because they're really not as they seem. It doesn't mean that I ignore studies. I absolutely value and respect studies, but I take all of them with a grain of salt. Not only do you need to recognize that when you're looking up studies, you are looking them up with that bias of what you're already wanting to be true. So think about when you look up benefits of something or harmful effects of something else. Every time I read a study around something that has a bias of that I want to be true, I will intentionally go find a study that says the opposite. So after reading a paleo book, I'm picking up the China study. I'm picking up a book written by a doctor who's a, Dr. Ornish, or a famous plant-based doctor, because I want to receive all the information without bias. And when you think about studies, first of all, most researchers would rather ask, how do we not be sick, or how do we end this epidemic, rather than how do we get healthy? How do we live longer? Most studies are funded by interested parties. I could have spent so much time on this. I could have pulled hundreds of different studies that contradict each other, but this was just the low-hanging fruit. This really basic study about whether sugary drinks lead to weight gain. And the studies with financial conflict of interest came back with 16.6%. And the studies with no financial conflict of interest, said that 83.3% of people who drank sugary drinks had a correlation with weight gain. I mean, it's just so obvious. If you've seen in the last, I think, month, there was this study that came out that had absolute junk science that was talking about intermittent fasting actually being harmful for your health. And the amount of emails that I received from clients asking why this was coming out. Every year there's something that comes out about vitamins and minerals. Oftentimes there are so many unmeasured measurables. I mean, there's no way to measure these things because you can't take humans and clone them and then put them in a bubble for their entire lives and then do studies on them, because that's what we would need to have a true control. Think about the diet of these people, stress levels, age, culture, climate, education level, sleep, food preferences. What about their gut microbiomes? Hormones, physical activity, genetic predispositions or mutations, childhood trauma, mental biases. I mean, I could just go on and on. Most studies are not even performed on women because of our hormones, and we cycle, so we don't make a good control group. You read a whole book about intermittent fasting, and then at the last chapter, they go, but for women, we don't know. Or cold plunging. Oh, but we haven't studied what it is for women when they're in the luteal versus follicular phase of their cycle. So we first focus on the foundational principles. And this is regardless of all of these measurables. To understand first that the one-size-fits-all approach is not accurate. You'll have to find what works for you, your clients, and your patients right now, and then learn how to tweak it when the body's needs change, because they will change. We're always in just a season of our lives. For example, women premenopause, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal. For men, age, activity level. Also, where are you in the season of your life for how hard you work and how many hours you work versus someone in retirement? So you are simply not going to be able to stick with one diet, one approach for the rest of your life. Tailoring your nutrition protocol, that last 5%, it requires learning the body's secret communication, which I'm going to teach you today. But I have to say, and I'll repeat this again, this last 5%, everyone is so obsessed with getting their macronutrient ratios right. Should I be vegan? Should I eat animal protein? Should I be keto? Should I do carnivore? When they don't focus on the foundational principles. Here's the foundational principles. To eat unprocessed foods that rot and spoil. When I'm teaching this to a client, I make it really simple. I call it the energy principle of eating. That anything that has energy dies. Your phone will eventually run out of battery. We will eventually die. So anything that has energy requires an exchange of energy to keep going. You have to plug your phone in each day, or else it won't work for you. And we need to eat food and drink water to receive energy to keep going. Foods that have the highest amount of energy rot and spoil the quickest. And we've all joked before, it's like you buy a container of organic strawberries and then you blink and they have mold on them, or an avocado going bad before your very eyes. It's like these foods have the highest amount of energy, nutrition, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, cofactors for your body, versus a cereal that sits in a plastic bag in a cardboard box on a shelf that promises you on the front of the box that there's tons of vitamins and minerals synthetically injected into it, or the oatmeal that sits on the shelf that can sit in the pantry for years and still be good to eat. So the quicker a food rots and spoils, the healthier it is for you. If you wouldn't want to leave, eggs, vegetables, avocado, and sprouts out on the table for 3 hours because it would not be healthy or even safe for you to come back and eat it if it weren't refrigerated. But you could leave a box of crackers out or some cookies that you bought out for 2 weeks and then walk by and eat it. That's the concept of the energy principle of eating. Eating until 80% full and leaving 20% room for digestion. Doing a basic fast of 12 hours every night just for good old-fashioned digestive wellness, and drinking half your body weight in ounces of purified water. Although I want to make note to not drink a lot right before and during meals, because you will deplete the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, which is imperative for you to digest your meal and actually get the nutrition and nourishment from the meal. So back in the day in the 90s, remember when Weight Watchers was saying, if you're hungry, drink a whole glass of water right before you eat because it will fill you up and you won't eat as much. It's like we were depleting our hydrochloric acid and then not digesting the meal well, causing a lot of chronic gut issues, bloating, and maldigestion. So if you go out to a restaurant and they have to refill your glass, you've had too much water during that time. I want you drinking the majority of your water in between the meals. Okay, let's go on and compare the 3 most popular diets: keto, paleo, and vegan plant-based versus like low animal protein. Let's talk about the keto diet for a couple of minutes. So the keto diet is designed to produce a state of ketosis, and the state of ketosis is defined by the presence of ketone bodies in the blood and the body using ketones as an energy source instead of carbohydrates. You do this by consuming high amounts of fat and restricting carbohydrates, usually to less than 50 grams a day. And I put here in the slide, although I won't go over it, the different varying levels of ketosis based on your blood level. So a lot of people on the keto diet will prick their finger and make sure that they are in fact in a state of ketosis. There's a very specific macronutrient ratio for the keto diet. 70 to 80% of your calories are coming from fat, 10 to 15% from protein, and 5 to 10% from carb. So people think the ketogenic diet is eating a lot of meat. It's actually not. Eating too much animal protein can kick you out of ketosis, as can eating even too many vegetables. Tomatoes, broccoli, things like this are very limited on the ketogenic diet. Now, there's pros and cons to any extreme diet. So let's go over the pitfalls and what the solutions are. The first problem with the keto diet is that it will throw off the body's balance of several key minerals, namely sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And this is necessary for optimal health. So my solution, if somebody is on the ketogenic diet, to add quinton hypertonic minerals first thing in the morning, and using the LMNT, the element electrolytes, throughout the day, especially if that person is active and sweating or using sauna as part of a weekly detoxification protocol. The second problem is that when you cut out carbs, you're eliminating many foods that are rich in micronutrients, fiber, and prebiotics. So we're not feeding the good flora in the gut, which can cause long-term gut issues. We want to add pre and probiotics, want to add fiber, and in some cases, I need to add vitamins through supplementation, and I do this through performing a micronutrient test, which we'll talk about in a second. The third issue I see is that long-term keto is going to cause carbohydrate resistance, and your thyroid needs some carbohydrate to convert T4 to T3, very important conversion for energy, mood, all things thyroid. So you need to rotate this diet and take breaks. When it comes to any more extreme diet, extreme doesn't necessarily automatically mean bad. It just means that there are going to be pros and cons, and you do need to rotate the diet so that you don't have any long-term imbalances. So what is keto great for? It is an amazing protocol for people who want appetite control and weight loss and aren't necessarily candidates or have a desire to use semaglutide or any of tirzepatide or any of those other drugs. Athletic performance, people who are type 2 diabetics, certain cancers, neurological disorders, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and gut infections. If you listen to a few podcasts where you have medical doctors going on and touting the benefits of the ketogenic diet, you'll finish that podcast going, maybe I should try keto. You immediately have a list of clients and patients that you go, oh, they would thrive on keto. And this is what I mean about the confirmation bias. It can be horribly detrimental diet for people who don't have a gallbladder or have trouble digesting fat. Remember, I said this diet is 70 to 80% fat. If you do an analysis and see that they have liver and gallbladder struggles, there's even some genetic mutations that would predispose people to do horribly on the ketogenic diet. People who need more fiber, people who have a history of colon cancer, people with eating disorders, because this diet is extremely restrictive. So now you're really starting to understand this concept that one person's medicine truly can be another person's poison. Another interesting thing, I put some studies, which funny, because we talked about poking the holes in studies. I do value studies. Here are some studies that talk about the benefits of using the ketogenic diet while in cancer treatment and in prevention. But I've also added studies that show plant-based diet in cancer is very helpful. So you read these studies and you go, well, what am I recommending? Is it keto or is it plant-based? The truth is, it's both. It really depends on the client. I take into account compliance, because if you're not going to be successful and compliant and disciplined in the diet, then we'll never know if it worked for you or not. What about the client's own intuition and preference? If a client comes to see me and they're in active cancer treatment, or they want to eat in a way that their number one goal is cancer prevention, I will offer them both diets. I might take other factors into account, but let's say I'm really split. I'll offer them both diets, explain what both look like, the pros and cons of both, and then I ask them to sit with it. I also want to trust a person's intuition. And they may say, let's start with the plant-based. I feel better starting there. So we start there. And I just want to take the pressure off of us practitioners, experts, doctors, naturopathic people. We're not supposed to get it right 100% of the time, the first time. That's why they call it a practice. We're in private practice. We're making highly educated guesses, and we're letting their body give us the feedback. And this is why any expert that's writing a book or sharing a message that's saying, this is the one diet that's going to work for everybody, lectins are horrible for everybody, you have to raise an eyebrow, because we know that the biochemical individuality of the person is most important. And so you might start with the ketogenic diet and they just don't feel great, and switch them over to plant-based, and then they start thriving. That doesn't mean you were wrong. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, which was guide them with the best information and education possible, and then teach them how to listen to themselves. The problem with our bodies is they don't speak English. The body speaks to us in symptoms. The body speaks to us in feedback communication. So we truly have to learn the language of the body in order to figure out how to do this dance together, instead of spout a bunch of information at somebody, and then when it doesn't work for them, they themselves feel like a failure. Then we have the paleo diet. The paleo diet consists of only eating foods available to the Paleolithic man. It includes vegetables, fruits, nuts, roots, and meats. It eliminates dairy, grains, sugar, and legumes. The biggest pitfall for the paleo diet is there aren't any guidelines for macronutrient ratios, and that confuses people and can cause out of balance protein or fat intake. So, for example, you saw with the keto diet, there were very specific percentages of macronutrients, meaning protein, carb, and fat intake. Well, somebody could say they're on the paleo diet and 70% of their diet comes from animal protein. And someone else can say, with certainty, that they're on the paleo diet, but only 5% of their diet comes from animal protein. So because there's no guideline on macronutrient percentage, you really need to give more detail and guidelines than simply here's what the paleo diet includes and excludes. And you really need the client to keep a detailed log so that we can reflect how they feel after a meal where we're tweaking their macronutrients. The second problem is that food companies have caught wind to this trend, and now there are so many packaged processed foods on the market labeled paleo. The truth is, if it comes in a bag or a box, it's not truly paleo. I mean, we were eating tree bark in Paleolithic times for our fiber intake. We weren't eating pork rinds from Whole Foods that were paleo because they were mixed with cassava. So be really mindful if you're doing the paleo diet that you're sticking to the foods that rot and spoil and only using those packaged foods in a pinch. My opinion is that the paleo diet does work for the majority of people who have general health goals to stay lean, maintain muscle, support hormones, and have consistently high energy levels. But I don't know that that is solely due to what we're adding in, and not equally responsible due to the things that we're taking out. And that's a big argument in even something as extreme as the carnivore diet, which I'm not going over today, but the carnivore diet, in very little words, is eating nose to tail. So the animal nose to tail. So not just the protein flesh of the animal, but the organ meat and everything that's involved from nose to tail of the animal, and then some fruits and honey. It's a very extreme diet, but you will have people that say it completely put their autoimmune disease into remission where nothing else could, including the paleo diet. And the argument, is it because they're eating lots of organ meat, or is it because of all of the things that they removed? Lastly, you have a plant-based, vegetarian, low protein type protocol, and you see that there's a lot of room here as well for interpretation. But typically, this is a diet with no animal protein, and it's rich in vegetables, beans, legumes, which are not allowed on the paleo diet, fruits, healthy fats, grains, which are also not allowed on paleo, nuts, and seeds. The pitfalls of this are that elimination of animal proteins can create amino acid depletion as well as amino acid imbalance. And then you have your iron and B vitamins. So again, I use the micronutrient test to confirm, and then I can supplement as necessary. Like the paleo diet, there's no reference range for macronutrient ratios. So people can eat very high carbohydrate, like having a meal of rice, beans, in a tortilla with some corn chips, and that's not necessarily the healthiest representation of a vegetarian diet. And these diets don't necessarily restrict processed foods or sugar. So like my client in the very beginning, you could say you're vegan or vegetarian and eat a bunch of fake tofu hot dogs or, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and be getting very little nourishment from your food, but egoically tout how healthy and vegetarian you are. So when going plant-based, you have to teach people how to be responsible in doing that, which is eating a base of plants, fruits and vegetables first, then introducing your nuts and seeds, grains and legumes, and using processed food in a pinch. Plant-based diets are great for people who want to restrict methionine for certain cancers. Again, are in treatment for different kinds of cancers where keto didn't work or wasn't appropriate. People who are older with less activity, or people who have impaired digestions and enzymes needed to break down animal protein. It can be very detrimental for people who have hormonal imbalance, since we know amino acids are precursors to hormones, growing children, people with digestive issues who cannot process fibrous foods and high carbohydrate diets, and people with diabetes where their blood sugar is not regulated. There is always going to be the exception to the rule. And these people confuse us. It's the vegan athletes who are ripped and have very high muscle percentage. It's the diabetics who cure themselves with a vegan diet where they're eating 10 to 12 servings of fruit per day, and the fructose going into their body is enough to give anybody else a diabetic shock. Elderly people who feel better with more animal protein to keep their muscle mass and prevent sarcopenia. Raw vegan who eats a ton of fruit and has balanced blood sugar. Try not to use these exceptions to the rule as the rule for most people. Now, I mentioned a few times the micronutrient test. There are so many aspects of our health where we do have to make an educated guess and let the body give us feedback, because we simply don't have the technology, and our body's innate wisdom will always be the final say. But if I don't have to guess, I'm going to test. I run the micronutrient test on almost every single client that is willing to do it when they come into my practice. And I do this test on myself once a year because I have been shocked to find that one or two people who are vegan that have a balanced ratio of amino acids, have enough B vitamins, where I would have been supplementing unnecessarily. Or the person who eats meat but is not diversified in what they eat. They just eat chicken breast and filet mignon, and their amino acid diversity is completely off. I have my own personal story about this. I run this test on myself once a year. But when I was pregnant with my second child, I ran it before I got pregnant so that I could tweak my supplementation. And then in the third trimester, out of curiosity, I ran it again. And I am this person who I was eating extremely healthy. And I was taking quite a few supplements to begin with. I think most people would be shocked at how many supplements I was taking as a pregnant person. And I did the micronutrient test, and the amount of depletions that came up in a way were surprising and not surprising. It was surprising because I eat so healthy. I eat organic. I shop at the farmer's market. We were hardly eating out. It was COVID. We were making 99.9% of our meals at home from organic local produce that was in season. And I was supplementing at least 8 different supplements as just my foundations. And then in a way, it's not surprising because I was growing a child who was sucking the very nutrition out of my body. So I took the micronutrient test. I adjusted my supplementation, and I had the most amazing postpartum time. Very little mood swings, absolutely no postpartum depression, no issue with milk supply. And I 100% trace it back to the fact that I had the technology to do the micronutrient test on myself and adjust before I went through the birth. And I wonder how many women who struggle with postpartum depression, if we're just talking about fertility and pregnancy, who, if we were to do their micronutrient test going into the pregnancy, were already depleted going into the pregnancy. So I really want to test every single person for their micronutrients, but especially your pregnant women. Make sure they know what their depletions are. And as they grow this baby and head towards the 4th trimester, which is postpartum, that they are supported. Okay, so I know what you might be thinking at this point, which is that you might not have a practice in which you even have the time to sit with your patients and clients and go over these different diets and teaching them how to tweak, let alone even going over the foundation for them. And it really leaves you with 2 choices. One, you can always refer out. I mean, you would refer to a practice like mine, Nutritional Wisdom, where our sole purpose in the beginning is to find that person's unique medicine, the diet that is healing to them specifically at this time in their lives. And then the other 99% of what we do is the mind work in order to help them make these changes permanent. Because I know that as a practitioner, one of our biggest headaches is that our clients and patients just can't be compliant. There's so many mental blocks in the way of us doing the hard things that we need to do to empower ourselves and our health. And that's what we do in Nutritional Wisdom, is not only give them the information, but then help them put that into practice so that they can create permanent change. So your first option is refer out to an expert like myself or someone else you know that can really help them tweak their diet. The second option is to provide a general foundational guideline that may not be hitting that top 5%, but is hitting more than enough that your client or patient may never even come back to you asking for that last 5%. Why? Because doing the 95%, it makes them feel amazing, and pain is what creates desire, and there is no pain pushing them to search for more. And the 95% is this general guideline. I love Dr. Mark Hyman's concept of the Pegan diet. And he wrote a book called The Pegan Diet. He talks about the story of sitting in between a paleo expert and a plant-based expert, and that they were fighting with each other at this conference. And he was listening to their arguments, and he said to himself, well, I guess I'm Pegan. And it was the idea of taking all of the good from paleo and all of the good from plant-based and putting it together. And I shared his food pyramid, but it's the most balanced of all diet guidelines. I think it mostly represents the Mediterranean diet, which has been the longest studied protocol. Will this fit every person? No, that's the whole point of what we're talking about. But will the foundation help people improve their health? Absolutely, yes. So now we're talking about that last 5%. What are your unique needs? How do you tweak your ratio of protein, carb, and fat until you get the right feedback from your body? Now, again, I'll say, don't overestimate this part. Once you're eating clean and you're practicing the foundations, your body can handle this aspect of not being completely perfect all the time. I honestly wonder if, right now I would categorize myself as eating paleo diet. I have for many years, and it's not 100% paleo, but that's the category that I would put my eating practice in. I could probably go plant-based and feel exactly the same and amazing because the foundation of what I practice is solid. And this is what I was saying before, is that because all of this stuff sells and it makes the headlines and it's so trendy and it's so polarizing, for somebody to come out and say, for Dave Asprey to come out and say repeatedly, kale is bad for you, like Dr. Gundry in the Plant Paradox. And then Simon Hill to say, you don't need animal protein to have these big muscles. It's like, this is the stuff that sells. And this is the very thing that confuses us. I think it's not as sexy or cool to say, hey, we really need to master the foundations first. Eating unprocessed foods that rot and spoil, not overeating, leaving 20% room for digestion, drinking quality water, getting out in the sunshine, being in nature, moving our bodies every day, sweating, having clean products around us, not using chemicals on our food, and doing the emotional work that is needed, the emotional, spiritual work to be well. Nobody really wants to talk about that, but if you're in the practice of those foundations, do you ever need to get that 5% right? Now, how do you figure out if you're at the place where those foundations are covered, those wheels are in motion, you want more? Then this is how you do it. You learn your body's feedback communication. So here's a list of the short-term communication. Remember, this is the body's language. Right after you eat a meal, you should feel satisfied, the absence of sweet cravings, the absence of a desire for more food, even though you no longer feel hungry. Your energy feels renewed. You have a sense of feeling mentally refueled, renewed, and restored. Your emotions feel improved. You feel mental clarity and sharpness, and there's no negative feedback from the digestive system. Your long-term feedback is that you have steady energy, you have deep sleep, you are pooping 2 to 3 times a day, your skin is clear, the white of your eyes is glowing, you have a strong immune system. That is the feedback from your body. You are treating me the right way. The negative feedback is the absolute opposite. How many times have you eaten a meal, you want to take a nap after, you're staring into space, you're craving something sweet immediately. You go back as you're putting the food away and eating more food, even though you're already got that feedback from your body that you're full. You feel heavy and down in the dumps. You feel clogged in your head. You can't think. You've got that brain fog. You don't feel satisfied. An hour later, you're going back for food, even though you know you ate a full meal and ideally wouldn't think about food for the next 3 hours. Your long-term negative communication is that you're tired, your sleep is crappy, you're constipated, you have diarrhea, you're constantly bloated, your skin's a mess, you're getting sick all the time. I wanted to talk about the 3 situations in which you really cannot trust the feedback from the body. There's digestive issues, food addictions, and behavioral patterns. With digestive issues, that can cause you to react to certain foods in an inflammatory way that you wouldn't normally react to. Again, I don't want you to guess. I want you to test. And we'll talk about the gut zoomer in a moment. When you have digestive issues, underlying infection, or generally speaking, leaky gut, you might need to support the digestion with probiotics, zinc, hydrochloric acid, digestive enzymes in order to get a good reaction from an otherwise healthy meal that you'd react well to. It's not easy to practice, much more simple to say, but so many of people's bloating and indigestion after a meal is because they ate too much of that meal. They were stressed when they ate the meal. They did not chew their food well. It happened to me yesterday. I was so bloated and burping after eating a meal that I know is the right meal for me that I ate the day before and felt great. But I ate it in a very stressed, rushed way, and I did not digest it well. This can be a confusing category in and of itself when someone does have leaky gut and we're trying to figure out what that really means and what's at the root of that. You have everything from the specific carbohydrate diet, the GAPS diet, the FODMAPs diet, and the SIBO diet, which is a combination of SCD and FODMAPs. And these diets have a list of foods that also contradict each other. So if it's okay on the specific carbohydrate, it might be a no-no for FODMAPs. And so what do you do? Well, I want you to remember diets for gut or digestive issues are temporary. If you ever have somebody that has digestive issues and they say, oh, well, my doctor put me on the FODMAPs diet and I felt so much better. That is like having a thorn in your finger and the finger gets infected. And instead of removing the thorn, which is getting to the root of the underlying infection or reason why this person has gut issues. They just put some medicine on it, a Band-Aid on it, and maybe a box on it so you don't bump your finger. So you no longer are feeling pain from that finger, but the thorn has never been removed. So you never really heal. We do not want people on the FODMAPs diet forever. It's way too restrictive. We do not want people on leaky gut diet protocols forever. Not only from a mental standpoint of it drives people crazy, but it's not meant to be a long-term diet. These diets are meant to alleviate symptoms while you're testing, getting to the root of the issue and helping that client or patient heal. So what I like to do is take all of those gut protocols, and despite the small differences, I focus on the similarities and the most well-researched and clinically successful protocols. And when you look at this, all of these diets avoid refined sugar and limit natural sugars and carbs, avoid packaged and processed foods, acknowledge dairy as a common food intolerance, either eliminate or limit legumes, are soy-free, focus on the importance of eating enough fat, recommend nutrient-dense foods, organic vegetables and grass-fed meats, and emphasize the importance and the role of detoxification and drainage practices like infrared sauna, detox baths, heavy metal removal. This is another reason why if you have someone with gut issues, you cannot simply put them on a diet protocol. You have to test so that you can see, is this bacterial? Is this fungal? Is this parasitic? Is there H. pylori at the invisible helm of all of this, depleting hydrochloric acid and allowing opportunistic infection to overgrow? Are enzymes low? Is this person inflammation high? The diet accompanies this information, but is not meant to replace this. The second situation in which you cannot trust your body are food addictions. We get addicted to sugar, caffeine, dairy, and other inflammatory substances. And the body starts to crave this even though it's not what we need. So it's hard because you might be putting someone on an elimination protocol or teaching them how to listen to their body, and they go, my body wants fries. My body wants bread. And Carly told me to listen to what my body needs. So listen. If your body is asking for foods that you know are not healthy for you, we have food addictions underlying, and we need to cut these out of the diet for 2 weeks and watch how the body's communication changes. I remember going off sugar for a few months, and when I slowly brought it back in, because I don't believe in living a sugar-free life for the rest of your life, like kill me right now. I mean, I want to enjoy all of life in balance. I remember the first time I had sugar after not having it, I felt anxious. My heart started beating more quickly. I could feel the sugar in my blood. It was such an exacerbated response because I hadn't had it in so long. And so, listen, I don't want that to be the response every time we eat sugar. It was just a exacerbated example of how when we remove the thorn and we actually begin to heal, we can listen and trust our body's intuition and feedback. And the same thing with behavior patterns. Sometimes we're just stuck in negative patterns. Do we eat when we're not truly hungry? Do we eat certain meals out of convenience? This isn't always about food. This is about shifting your psychology around food. You know, we could teach people how to change their behavior. In fact, we are a culture obsessed with behavior modification. But if we don't teach people how to heal their behaviors at the root, which is of the mind, our thoughts are what drive our emotions are what dictate all behaviors. We know better that a salad might be healthier than fast food. It doesn't mean that we'll do it. There is a gap between knowing better and doing better. And there's a gap between doing better and doing better consistently enough to create that change that we're all looking for. Think about it. You could have a PhD in nutrition and eat fast food every day. So knowledge isn't necessarily equates to power. You cannot just tell clients and patients to change their behavior. You have to offer them the mind work tools so that they can show up day after day and do the right thing, because we all know the body craves consistency in order to heal. And that's why so much of what we do at Nutritional Wisdom is not just about finding your unique medicine, but teaching people how to strengthen their mind, strengthen their discipline, and also how to listen to the body, not the mind. So here's the simplicity of our eating foundation: eating unprocessed food, drinking filtered water, practicing mindful eating. Again, if we were focused on this, would it matter that last 5%? So let's review. Nutritional science cannot explain it all. We each have a unique set of needs that can change over time. Everyone should be eating from the same selection of food, eating alive, unprocessed foods that rot and spoil quickly, and using the micronutrient test to assess nutrient imbalances, as well as the gut zoomer test to identify underlying gut infections so that the patient client can heal and find the healing diet that is right for them in a place of prevention instead of treatment. The ratio of healthy food is the key to understanding your unique medicine. And you have to be in communication with your body, or else you'll be chasing the latest diet studies and fads forever. And it's going to change. It always changes. And you will continue to feel ungrounded in your approach to the nutrition aspect to health and wellness. We want to clear the body of food addictions, negative habits, and digestive imbalances so that your internal communication is loud and clear. So I'm hoping that you're really starting to understand that those hunky gentlemen experts at the beginning of this webinar, they're not wrong and they're not right. They are very polarizing because that sells. But you truly have to take this information and use your intuition to say, well, you know what, unprocessed foods that rot and spoil, that let's start with that foundation. And then you can play around with these different diets: keto, paleo, vegan. None of them are bad, but no one who's not you can tell you or your clients or patients exactly what's right for them. We have to work together. We can start with the offering and then wait for the body's feedback. And only then do you empower people to become their own experts, their own nutritionists for the rest of their life. And that is a gift. That is a dharma that we can give our patients and clients, our family, our friends, and ourselves, way more than the short period of time that we might be actively seeing them, telling them to do this diet. Imagine if you're teaching them to become their own nutritionist, to become their own empowered doctor and practitioner when it comes to food and nutrition. You have given them a lasting legacy, a lasting gift. And that to me is priceless. So here's how we stay connected. We're going to open it up for some questions now, but you can sign up for my newsletter on carlypollack.com. We offer one-on-one coaching. We're a completely virtual practice. We see clients all over the country, some outside of the country. You can follow me on Instagram at Carly Pollack. And I did want to offer, if you have any special clients or patients in mind that could really use this help, or you yourself wanting to go through the program and heal you first, then mention this lecture and we'll offer 10% savings on our Wellness Starter program. Okay, let's open it up.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Carly. I loved how you focused on, really meeting the patient where they're at, because we're all in different seasons of our lives and it changes what we need. And also how the body speaks in symptoms. You really have to listen to that and get to the root cause. We did have 5 questions that came in while you were talking. So starting with the first one, I'm going to put it on the screen here. Steph wants to know what micronutrient test you use.
So I use the Vibrant. I thought that was assumed, but I use Vibrant America's micronutrient test.
And then what if someone wants to do an at-home test? What options do we have for that?
Well, I could be understanding this wrong, but they want to do it themselves at home. that might be the question. The micronutrient test is the absolute best on the market because they're not only looking at serum blood, but they're looking at the whole blood cells. So you're looking at nutrients that are not just short acting, where if somebody eats a steak the night before and then they go and do the micronutrient test, their iron will be high. That's pretty obvious. I want to see what's being absorbed, what's being retained in the body. I want to look at that 3 to 4 month lifespan. And it's almost like testing glucose versus A1C numbers. And so I don't, there's some other at-home tests out there that are finger prick and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't waste the client's time with that. You really have to look at different aspects of the blood. And when you think about that, every time you go to a Western doctor and they take your serum blood, it's like you're only looking at what's going on right at that moment. And think about how different your last couple of days could be if you were sick and not feeling well, or there are times in which I don't eat as much animal protein depending on where I am in my cycle. So I don't really want the test to reflect that. I want to look at a longer reflection of absorption and nutrient status. And that's why Vibrant's micronutrient test is so different than all the other stuff on the market.
Thank you for that thorough answer. Next question, how often do you recommend micronutrient testing in pregnant females?
It is going to depend on how willing they are from a budget perspective to do the test. If I could spend everybody's money for them, I would do the test at the first trimester, and then I would do it between the second or third trimester. So I would do it twice. And then I would check in and do it again 3 months postpartum. So we call that the fourth trimester. But if you have someone that says, I can do this test once, then I would like them to wait until around the second to third trimester, because the first trimester, a lot of times there's so much morning sickness that their nutrition becomes very depleted. And I don't want them to freak out like they're pregnant and they're stressed about enough stuff, and then they do the micronutrient and everything is low. And so I'd like to wait till the end of the second trimester and they get their appetite back and they're really like energy back and they're eating. And then I would do it then, because if there's deficiencies, it allows us a few months to correct those deficiencies also while that baby's getting really big and sucking all that nutrition and giving us the best coverage for birth and postpartum. And that's just my personal opinion. That doesn't come from Vibrant.
That makes total sense to me, though.
Yeah.
Next question. What do you recommend for water filtration, and is well water not advised?
Okay, that is a completely different lecture of a 3-hour variety. So the world of water is very controversial as nutrition. I break down water this way. It depends on what level you're at as far as what you want for your water. I think the very first level of education in water is to make sure that you've removed the toxins from the water. And that's typically where the conversation ends. It's like, get reverse osmosis or do distilled. And then there's absolutely nothing in the water. But as you continue to learn about water, water is alive. Water is either structured or unstructured. Water has age. And I know I sound kind of crazy to people who've never heard that before, but water can contain information. We want it to be structured. We want it to be flowing and not sitting in an underground reverse osmosis dark tank. So there's a lot of components, all the way up to then things you can put in your water like hydrogen and other molecules, and whether or not it has been mineralized. So I recommend the lowest level might be just water filtration, like a reverse osmosis or, an AquaTrue over-the-counter filter, all the way up to the water I drink, which is, a $5,000 filter, and it's hydrogenated and it's as close to spring water as possible, because my opinion is that spring water coming from natural springs that has the ability to go from deep in the earth's crust all the way through, up and through all of the minerals and fulvic and humic acids, and then out through the spring, is the most alive, structured, mineralized water. So it's a very loaded question, and I think that it's very overwhelming for people. So for my clients, I break it down into price point. What is somebody willing and able to spend, and what they're really interested in? Because for years I had a reverse osmosis system, and I felt like it removed all the water, but it was also somewhat dead water. It destructures the water, and then the water is just sitting there. So a whole different lecture for a different time. And you can always, Jennifer, email me outside of this and connect with me, and I can give you all the links and all the things that I share with my clients, everything from a really budget friendly to the, grand Mac of water filtration systems, which is what we have. And well water, it depends on the well.
Related to that, what do you recommend to structure distilled water?
So I don't recommend drinking distilled water. Distilled water is dead. I mean, you've taken everything out of it, including its life. That being said, if distilled water is what you have, and I also think distilled water pulls minerals from the body. Water is like a kid who doesn't have a lot of education and is trying to pull information from everywhere. When you distill water, it's pulling and it's trying to structure itself, and it can pull minerals from the body. That being said, if you have distilled water and you want to structure it, there's a few devices that will restructure the water, and there's quite a lot out there on the market at this point, which again, it's very overwhelming and a whole different topic for a different time. But you could look up water structure devices and get something very beautiful that will restructure the water. Also, when you put minerals in it, that will help to restructure it. I'm a big fan of Quinton minerals, the isotonic and hypertonic minerals, which come from Robert Slovak. If you want to look him up and listen to him talk about water, it's very fascinating.
Great. Thank you for that. And one final question. I know we're over time. Do you have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay. So AJS wants to know, I keep hearing meat is bad due to inflammation in the body. Can you unpack that briefly?
Sure. Briefly, it's a great question because it really comes back to everything I was saying. Can meat be inflammatory to one person and not to another? Yes. And then you're also looking at the quality of the meat. Most of these studies, if not all of these studies, I just don't want to speak in such absolute terms. So most of these studies that are done, they're not testing the appropriate amount, 4 ounces of grass-fed, pasture-raised animals that lived well, died happy, and were regenerating the land. They're studying factory farmed animals who were sick. And if we eat animals who are sick, we will be sick. And my husband is in regenerative agriculture, so you can imagine how fun we are at a dinner party and how many invites we get. But he is very passionate about all of the misinformation out there about how it is animals that are creating such the carbon footprint. He's deeply in regenerative agriculture, and raising animals the right way and eating the appropriate amount actually will be the key to regenerating the land. So this is a very controversial topic, and I'm hoping everybody today who was able to really absorb the message is realizing that if you practice the foundations and then you check in with your body, I'm eating animal protein every single day, and my inflammation levels on labs, and not only in my body, being very grateful to say that I am pain-free. It's like the clinical results speak for themselves.
Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any other questions in the comments. So with that, thank you again, Carly, for an amazing presentation. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope you learned a little something that was helpful, and see you again next time. Until then, stay vibrant, everyone. Take care.